All right, so the big news out of Major League Baseball today is that the Major League Baseball season is now delayed, officially delayed. So, how did we get here? And let's take a deep dive into all the things that happened in for us to be here today. So, earlier on Tuesday, Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred announced that because of the lack of collective bargaining agreement, there will be a cancellation of the first week of games in the Major League Baseball season, and because of the failure to get to a collective bargaining agreement. This is we've gone down this road before across the sport, and for the first time since 1994, there won't be any games on the schedule. There will be regular season games canceled because of the labor stoppage. And let's face it, for decades, the distrust between the players and the owners has rampantly increased, and the bad faith shown by the owners in the 1990s labor mayhem, where the World Series was canceled and the first part of 1995 season was delayed. It shows that there is a great stain on one of the great features of Americana, and that is Major League Baseball. And the owners bear much of the blame for the 2022 stoppage, but let's be fair and objective to all the parties involved, because when there's no labor agreement, everybody loses. Owners, players, fans, and employees that are employed by the teams to work during the baseball season, and for all of those said parties, they're going to lose money. Or for the fans' perspective, not being able, losing interest in watching baseball. So let's start with the owners, because I said they have much of the blame here, and the owners have bear much of the blame here. But let's keep in mind, though, that Major League Baseball has had an antitrust exemption for 100 years now, that thanks to a Supreme Court decision in 1922 that gave them such an exemption. But what that means is that they don't have to negotiate under good faith clauses, unlike the other leagues do. But that's what they've been doing over the last 50 years. There's been labor stoppage after labor stoppage, especially in the 70s and 80s, and then we had 25 years of labor peace before the 2020 mayhem began. And the owners have gained a tremendous amount of revenue over the last 20 years, and until COVID struck in 2020, where they only played a 60-game season. And the regulation, though, the league uses to set a barrier onto how much a team can spend on a particular season is called the competitive balance tax, which is used as a replacement of the salary cap, which the other leagues use. And teams do get paid by, and they get their money on raising prices on tickets, particularly premium seating tickets, and on concessions like food and beer, which in turn disillusions fans into going to the games. And in an age where you'd probably spend $20 on a ticket and food at a game, has now turned into like $80 for a single game. Like, for example, $50 for a ticket, and then $15 for 2 hot dogs, and $15 for a beer. That's how much the prices have gone up, because the owners use the justification that fans will spend whatever they want to go and see their favorite teams play. But now, when it comes to the competitive balance tax, let's take, for example, 2003, where the teams generated combined $3.88 billion over the course of the season. When it comes to selling tickets and generating revenue of all kinds and all of that. The competitive balance tax, which is the threshold, was $117 million in 2003. And when you base it off proportions, that represented 3% of the revenue generated by teams in 2003. Now take 2019, for example, where the competitive base tax threshold was $206 million, and the teams generated $10.37 billion. The share of that base tax is just 1.99% of the revenue pot. So if the proportion of the competitive balance stayed the same from 2003 to 2019, the competitive balance tax would have been $297 million. Now, under the proposal Major League Baseball put out on Tuesday, the competitive balance tax would only go up to $230 million in 2026. And if the 2003 proportion was used based off projection models, the tax should be at $366 million, and that's a $136 million difference. That's how bad of a faith the owners are showing in this process. Now, the players, trying to be fair, tried to compensate and compromise instead of the rate I just mentioned. They go up to only $263 million, but they said no to the final offer that featured the rise to just $230 million. Yet the owners keep spreading the lie that owning the baseball team, quote, isn't profitable. So why aren't the players getting the money like that? Are some owners cheap? Yes, and I'll touch on one of them with greater scrutiny in a little bit. Is love of money a factor? You bet it is. Is there a touch of reality or lack thereof a factor? Yes, a tremendous factor. The greed and irresponsibility of a few men with an inability to make hard choices and invest in fielding competitive teams has left the same teams as perennial contenders and has taken away some of the integrity of Major League Baseball. And such perennial contenders are like the New York Yankees, the LA Dodgers, and now the New York Mets under the richest owner, Steve Cohen, who actually want to win. And so those owners, I don't believe, are in the wrong on this. But I believe that they should have been more involved in the labor talks. I know Hal Steinbrenner, the Yankees owner, was part of the negotiating committee, but the players are rightfully complaining they don't get their fair share and their share of the jar of money. And in fact, it's really gotten worse over the last 20 years, and especially the last 10 or 11 years. But a sport that relied on continuity took such a devastating hit with the onset of the pandemic in 2020, because of the government restrictions that were in place to stop the spread of the coronavirus, and because everybody fouled up the 2020 negotiations on how to get back to play, it accelerated the growing distrust of the owners by the players, and the players only got paid X amount of their proposed salaries based on the 60 games that were on the schedule. And look, it is painfully obvious so that the owners are not negotiating in good faith, and they tried to get the players to cave into their demands. The players refused. After all, they're the ones to lock out the players. After all, they are, like other dishonest organizations, have tried to use COVID as an excuse not to pay the players, which has become a weak and childish argument because the American public has had enough of the COVID games in the last 2 years. And the owner, I think, that best summarizes the baseball's inability to roll up their sleeves instead of twiddling their thumbs is Dick Monfort, the owner of the Colorado Rockies. And I've mentioned his name on a couple of occasions before on this podcast, but Manfred is the owner and CEO of the Colorado Rockies, is also the chairperson of the 7-owner labor committee in Major League Baseball, and he leads the league's direction in the collective bargaining, and he authors much of the proposals that the league puts up in a bargaining setting. But given his history as the owner of the Colorado Rockies, and given the recent history, him being in charge is a bit sketchy for several reasons. Number one, the Colorado Rockies are baseball's most dysfunctional major league organization. They have alienated their fan base over the last couple of years thanks to some mind-numbing trades and poor roster decisions, and they're unwilling to invest money in great players, and they have no structure, they have no direction in the front office, and within that organization, there is no accountability whatsoever from players to coaches to executives and upper level employees. There is nobody in that Colorado Rockies organization that had the balls to say Jeff Briddick was arrogant and ignorant at his job as the general manager. And Manfred has no idea and no feel, no clue on how to run a professional franchise. And yeah, he never had a background in baseball before becoming the owner of the Rockies. He is the most stubborn of all the owners. Therefore, he gets the seat as the head of the labor committee. And since the owners love their money, he gets the nod to be stubborn, be as stubborn as possible at the negotiations table. And the owners know that. Heck, he even complained about the obstacles of owning a baseball team, such as paying for security and compliance with COVID-19 restrictions. That alone should tell you something about Dick Manfred, who personifies everything about the owners and the owners' reputation across the general public. The second party, let's talk about him for a couple of minutes. Rob Manfred. Manfred was selected as the commissioner by the owners back in 2014 on the basis of being their yes man. So he says everything yes to everything the owners want, and the owners want to introduce or ban from the game. And this includes eliminating really a fun quotient to the game, the same quotient that is becoming popular among the younger fans. And so, but eliminating that quotient makes baseball a lot more boring. Mr. Manfred did not offer a single ounce of inspiring leadership during this lockout, and he only arrived in Florida on Friday to try and get a deal done, which was totally pointless. Yeah, he has not done anything other than to be the yes man for the owners, and Major League Baseball is leaderless and out of touch, and that's thanks to Rob Manfred. And the yes man to greedy, irresponsible owners who just want to look good spending money on new stadiums funded by taxpayer money. And this is also the same man that devalued the Commissioner's Trophy as, quote, a piece of metal. And also the same guy who laughed at the press conference yesterday that he had about canceling the first week of the season. But this isn't surprising at all, considering Manfred was the outside counsel in the 1994-95 baseball shenanigans, and he wasn't much of a valuable resource there either, since it took the Supreme Court and the courts to make something happen on that front. And he hasn't one bit embraced all of the wonderful and colorful personalities that have come up in the last few years, from Fernando Tatis Jr. to Juan Soto. And third, I think the Players Union was in the moral right this whole time, but this is where I'm stunned and disappointed on their front too. And we all experienced the mayhem of 2020, where baseball had an amazing opportunity to reboot itself, to rebrand itself as America's pastime, to win back some of the fans they lost in 1994 by starting their season well ahead of the NBA, the National Hockey League, and have a monopoly where the young folks can only watch television and do nothing but stay home to help curb the spread of the virus. And instead, we had a 60-game season where COVID outbreaks ran supreme, and the NBA started their season, their bubble season at the same time, and the NHL the playoffs too. Oh, and the NFL started training camps at the same time too. So baseball got a grand total of 4 days of exclusivity, where they should have gotten 4 to 6 weeks of such time. And the argument of public perception became totally pointless when the Korean Baseball Organization started their games on May 5th. And then the owners want to play because of the excuse of COVID and keeping the money. So, but this is where I think I'm a little disappointed with the players, because the players should have known that the owners were going to pull off the same nonsense they did back in 1994 and 1995, and they should have warned either the congressional and judiciary committees in the House and the Senate, because they're the ones that deal with the antitrust and labor laws, or the National Labor Relations Board to file a claim of bad faith, because the owners weren't going to negotiate. The owners weren't going to do an about face for 18 months after the 2020 shenanigans. They should have had a discussion with either members of the board right after the season ended, and given them either a stern warning that the owners were going to be up to their old antics again. And after all, it did take a future Supreme Court justice to give a proverbial FU to the owners to force the start of the 1995 season. Are players upset with the owners? Of course they should be. That they have every right to. But I do want to quote something from a president who nominated the future Supreme Court justice following a financial mess, which is something similar to what baseball is dealing with now. That we are in the far midst of crisis is now well understood. Our nation is at war against a far-reaching network of violence and hatred. Our economy is badly weakened, a consequence of greed and irresponsibility on the part of some, but also our collective failure to make hard choices and prepare the nation for a new age. The players' inability to compromise and make hard choices and see the big picture and the writing through the wall and the collateral damage that would happen if they didn't get a deal done would do with the game. That their inability to see that was beyond foolish too. And maybe Congress should intervene and threaten to end the league's antitrust exemption. That will come up the next time when negotiations begin as well, presumably in 5 years, because every collective bargaining agreement is usually for 5 years. So, but no expectation on that front there. So everybody loses. And Major League Baseball has gotten itself into a bloody civil war with no end in sight.